Tom, thanks. Hey, man, where you going? Right here. So, Jill, do you want to sit on the left or the right? Okay, cool. I'll sit here. So Tom wasn't lying. This was tough to pull together. But I will say that one of the things that Tom told me when I went to him and Tom Zerbucken to propose doing this, from the beginning, Tom told me to go big. He said, go big. And so I appreciate that encouragement. We tried to go big, and I think that, the turnout today shows two things. But the main thing it shows is that there is a hunger for getting involved and doing things and changing the world, making the world better in these cities that we live in and love. So I'd like to ask Jill Ford to come up, and we're going to start our conversation. So Jill Ford is a special assistant to the mayor of Detroit, Mike Dugan, for entrepreneurial initiatives. And she's been here about 6 months. Has it been 6 months? Oh, my goodness. She just got here. And so when I was putting this event together and trying to determine who were some of the key people to talk to around this issue of urban entrepreneurship in Michigan, one of the first people that was recommended to me to talk to was Jill Ford. So we met downtown, and I remember being immediately impressed by her and thinking that, man, if Mayor Dugan is bringing in people like Jill Ford to talk entrepreneurship, he's serious. So let me just say, by way of introduction, that Jill has a bachelor's degree in computer science from Harvard University and a master's in business administration from the Wharton School. And after her college education, she spent some time over in Ghana facilitating entrepreneurship over there and getting foreign investment to come into Ghana to support these entrepreneurs. So I like to say that she was facilitating business in Africa before it was cool. And later she worked in the more traditional tech roles in Silicon Valley for Microsoft and Motorola, among other firms. So Jill, welcome to the University of Michigan. Go Blue.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we're so glad that you could join us today. So the first thing I want to ask you, again, when we first met, I was so impressed by your personal journey to this point. So would you just take a minute or two and describe that journey to the audience as you described it to me that first time?
Absolutely. So I'm actually quite excited today that we were able to start off with a speaker from New Brunswick, my hometown. And I am very, very thankful to the people of New Brunswick, especially the teachers and the administrators in our public school system who went above and beyond to make opportunities available to the students. I would not be here today if it weren't for those teachers and administrators and mentors and just all of the members of the community who reached out and spent extra hours and just went above and beyond to really make it possible for the students to get to the next phase of whatever it was that they were trying to do in their lives. So New Brunswick's very dear to my heart. So after graduating from high school in New Brunswick, I went to Harvard, where I studied computer science, as David mentioned. And after graduating from Harvard, I've really had three main phases to my career so far. On the technical side, on the corporate business development side, and on the angel investing and advising side. So the technical side, I worked for a company called Trilogy. And Trilogy was definitely a very amazing experience. It accelerated our aging process in both the good ways and probably in giving us some extra gray hairs too. So we were a software company, and we, amongst other things, building configuration software, we also spun off a lot of companies. So it was a company that really encouraged us to take our most ambitious ideas and just go run with them and start new divisions of the company and spin off companies. And so we actually were on the cover of Forbes several times. We spun off companies. One of our companies actually went IPO, and this is from a little software company in Austin, Texas. After Trilogy, I went to the Wharton School of Business and came across some students who had run a business plan competition in Ghana and given away $1,000 and positioned it as a means of alleviating poverty that was an alternative to traditional aid through the enablement of entrepreneurs. And they were graduating, so they thought, oh, this is a cool project, but we're moving on to other things. And I thought, wait, this is actually a great idea. I mean, just think about it. What if you took this and you pulled in more capital-intensive companies, you increased the fundraising that you did, you got strategic partners who could be a part of this thing, and then pulled in the press. And they looked to me and said, how would you like to come to Africa? And so that was my introduction into running this business and going into Ghana and going into Africa altogether. And it was a wonderful experience to actually bring all of those things to fruition that we had talked about. And it demonstrated to me how much I really love the process of just coming up with an idea and then figuring out how to bring it to life and pulling in all the advocates and the resources to make this overly ambitious thing in some respects actually happen. So the press that we got noticed in a lot of places around the world and ended up being noticed at Microsoft. And so they looked at, it's like, what you were doing over there, that's business development. You should come and do it here. And so I went over to Microsoft and started my business development career, phase 2 of my career. And from there, got recruited down into Motorola, where I took that business development skill into mobile games. And so I globally sourced and selected the games that were preloaded and distributed on Motorola devices. So if you ever played Tetris on a Motorola device, that was me. And so I was on the buy side with Motorola, and then I went over to the sell side with Disney. And through that experience in mobile games, got a chance to really understand how an ecosystem is formed. I got a chance to interact with the developers, but also the VCs and the angel investors and the middleware partners and the people who provide the enabling software and hardware for the game developers. And I got to see how all these little components are so necessary in order for any of them to work well. And so that understanding of the ecosystem and the entrepreneurship ecosystem became a foundation for the next phase that I wanted to go into of angel investing and advising. And so I had always really loved big challenges and working with companies to understand what their goals were and to figure out how to make these sometimes audacious goals possible. And so in addition to my core portfolio of startups, I would work with a whole variety of startups, everything from security startups to a dentist on wheels, to help them figure out how they could get to their next funding goal or their next product goal or whatever it was that they wanted to do. I just thought, if there's something that seems like a compelling endeavor to take on, something that would have interesting revenue impact, interesting social impact, or just would be cool to do, then let's try it. Let's see why this should be done, as opposed to thinking about, oh, well, all the reasons why it can't be done. And this is one of the things that I'm so excited about with the Urban Entrepreneurship Initiative, because we are empowered to solve our own challenges and to come up with ways that we can see a pain point and then figure out all the different ways that we might be able to work towards solving it. And that is what creates the opportunity for us to create these new companies and to have them scale and grow and become things that are of interest to a whole entire mass market. And so I love that whole process, and that's something that's been pretty much continuous throughout my career, even going back to grade school.
All right, so again, you were facilitating, this entrepreneurship in Africa, and that's an experience that I would say probably most of us have not had, and most of us probably will not have. So what would you say were the key things you learned from that experience in Africa?
So the experience in Africa was very fascinating, and there's a few things that stood out to me that I still remember to this day, even though that was about 10 years ago. One was the importance of face-to-face communication in doing business. And as a person who's worked in the corporate environment, there's definitely been times when I've talked over the phone with people for months, sometimes even years, and done business. But when I went to Ghana, it was very important for people to make that face-to-face connection, and sometimes driving for hours so that people could make that face-to-face connection. And it just really underscored the importance of relationship, the importance of trust, and especially as people are getting ready to start to embark on a new journey together. And entrepreneurship, as many of the other speakers have noted today, it is a journey. And it is a journey that you want to take with friends, you want to take with people that you trust. And so having that face-to-face interaction is very important.
All right, so moving along to your Silicon Valley career. Now, sitting here, you make it sound like everything was just rosy, and I went here, I went there, and everything was great. And Jamie, a few minutes ago, Jamie Shea indicated to our attendees that people should go to work in industry and get some experience before they dive in and do something in a particular field. And you did that. You went to be a corporate insider in California. So what I'd like to know is what difficulties did you encounter with that? And how did you deal with those on the way to doing what you're doing now?
I love Tiffany Sadek's comment earlier about resiliency. And as I've gone through my entire career, the importance of resiliency has always been something that's come up. I think it's always important to be able to be adaptive and to understand how to not just take a direction, but to know how to change direction if there are barriers that will come up, because they will. And so when I think back to some of the challenges that I've had, a lot of times when I see challenges, I don't necessarily think of them as challenges. I more so think about them as things that I need to figure out a way to work around to get to some sort of success. But when we started off with the initiative in Ghana, for example, it was starting off with myself and a student and a few other supporters. And we had this big vision of being able to have something that could bring 500 entrepreneurs in and be able to have 100 VCs and CEOs around the world acting as mentors to entrepreneurs in Ghana. And this was something that seemed like an impossible goal. And so figuring out, okay, well, how do we do this thing? It was definitely one of the challenges that we looked into. And a lot of times with challenges, one of the first things that becomes very helpful is to talk to people, to really get great advice from people who may have seen your situation before or may have seen a similar situation. And what I have also found as well is that often talking to people gives an opportunity to just sound out the problem yourself. And so I would say that that's been one of the great ways that I have found to overcome challenges.
Okay. Well, that face-to-face thing also applies in Jamaica. As my wife and I got married in Jamaica some years ago. I know she hates me talking about this, but we could talk for months to people on the phone about arranging this or arranging that. Nothing happened till you got in front of them. So I think that must be an African thing. I don't know. But I also find even here at the university, getting in somebody's face is much more important than talking on the phone, sending an email. So I think that's a lesson that could probably apply generally. So here's the thing everybody wants to know. You were living in San Francisco,
Yes.
making big money, enough money to be an angel investor, living a life. And then you come and move to Detroit to take on this role as a person who is spurring on entrepreneurship here. What caused you to make that transition?
I was heavily attracted to Detroit. I have just always been attracted to things that I think have great potential. And I heard about what was going on with the bankruptcy, and I heard about the various challenges that were in the news. And so I literally just took out a map and started doing my own analysis of Detroit. And I started doing some research online, and I was like, wow, okay, so you've got all this undervalued real estate, and you've got this amazing population of people, and you've got all of these funders who are available, and the proximity to other industries. And if you put all these things together in the right way, I just thought that there would be amazing opportunities for great revenue impact, great social impact, and really an opportunity to change the world. And it was hard to stay away from that.
So following on with that, then now that you're here, what do you see as the major challenges and opportunities facing these local entrepreneurs?
Well, I think it takes looking at it not just from a business's perspective, but also looking at the infrastructure and foundational sorts of things. Sometimes the basics are something that give a major opportunity for both solving challenges, but also for creating new companies and new entrepreneurial activities that will create the solutions that will help the entire ecosystem. So as I've been here, I have had a chance to talk with a number of entrepreneurs, and even in listening to Leslie today and some of the other panelists, helping people to get access to space so that they can grow their businesses, helping people to be able to get access to the transportation that they need, and to be able to get to interesting jobs, to be able to get to entrepreneurial activities as well. So I think that these are actually really exciting opportunities for us, and that they're things that we can, again, bring together all these great ingredients that are already here in the right way to be able to solve a lot of these things, and then create a solution that works for Detroit, but also that works for a lot of other places as well.
So then what's the vision? Where do you think Detroit is going to be with respect to all this entrepreneurship activity, say, in 2024?
Oh, it's 2024 is an amazing distance. Definitely to try to predict on. If I knew that, I would have a whole nother job. But I think that this is a very exciting time to be in Detroit. I think that all of the ingredients are here, and we have amazing people who are driving towards putting those ingredients together as well. And so that creates the foundation that you see in a very fertile entrepreneurship ecosystem, something where you've got great ideas, you've got lots of people getting together and talking about these things, you've got people taking those ideas and taking action. And when you start doing that, then you start seeing companies, you start seeing new industries. Some of the things that I'm very interested in are creating more of a almost a two-way pipe as well between all of the great things that are happening in Detroit and all of the great things that we see outside of Detroit as well, increasing the storytelling and the awareness. And I think that as more people learn about the great opportunity in Detroit, we're going to see a lot more people wanting to come here, wanting to partner with Detroit companies. I think that we're going to see a lot more scale as well that's going to come from a lot of the great companies that are starting and growing now. And I think that there's going to be a just massive growth with regards to the impact that Detroit is having within Detroit, but also the impact that Detroit is having throughout the world.
I certainly agree with you. I think one of the foundations of this Urban Entrepreneurship Initiative is to establish these connections with urban centers around the world so we can exchange ideas and exchange products.
Yes.
And so I think that we're just in the beginning of that, but it's exciting to be thinking about that. So what I'd like to do right now I know that you guys have some initiatives that you're developing that you can't talk specifically about, going to be announced, soon. So we're not going to try to pry into that right now too much, but I'm going to throw it open to anyone in the audience here who wants to ask you some questions about what you're doing in Detroit. So, question, anyone? Yes.
What are your plans with respect to diversifying the businesses within Detroit?
I think one of the things that has stood out to me is that there's entrepreneurship at a variety of levels in Detroit. So there's actually, I would say, a diverse population of entrepreneurs and a diverse population of businesses that we need to increase the awareness about. And I'd love to see those businesses have the opportunity to grow and to scale and to have greater awareness, and then to see what the definition of diversity really is here with regards to the businesses. I think that there's quite a diverse range of people who are doing some amazing entrepreneurial activities within Detroit right now.
Yes, sir. So let me repeat the question because the webcast can't hear from the audience. Okay. So I think the gist of your question is, as we do this economic development in Detroit, and we're having these new companies come in and we're giving them tax breaks or whatever kinds of incentives to do economic development in Detroit, are we going to insist that they also do something to make life better on the ground for people who are living in Detroit, whether it's employment or some other kind of social good that they're providing for people in Detroit?
Interesting. Well, I am quite new here to know all of the activities that are going on, but I would say that one of the goals that I've taken on is to make sure that we have a very diverse range of businesses and people who are within the ecosystem here, and to make sure that we have a great distribution of the opportunities. And so the kinds of things that you've talked about would be opportunities that we want to make available to our businesses.
Let's see. Yes, sir. So let me just repeat that. So if you could make one change in Detroit, resources and politics aside, what would that change be?
I always like the idea of being able to make more than one change, but it's interesting. I think a lot of people would immediately think of access to capital as being one of the first things that comes to mind when they think of the first thing that the businesses need. But capital is often available without people being able to connect to it. So if there were one thing that I could do, I would want to make sure that there is optimal connectivity between the entrepreneurs and the resources that they need, so that there is optimal matching between a new entrepreneur who has a great idea and an investor who would be very interested in funding that person. And if there is a new real estate provider, whether it's a landlord or someone looking to sell space, I'd want to make sure that that kind of space and the position of that space and the layout of that space is something that the person who needs that kind of space immediately knows about. So I'd want to create that kind of optimal connectivity.
Okay. Yes, sir. So what do you see as the strongest hub or the center of activity for social entrepreneurship in Detroit? Who's doing it best? What would you highlight as a success story in Detroit right now? Somebody who's getting it right in terms of creating social good in Detroit from business.
There are so many. And that was one of the first things that stood out to me as I got to know Detroit. I really would feel like I couldn't just highlight one. And in fact, I think one of the most powerful things about the entrepreneurship community here is that there are so many. I remember coming to Detroit and getting a biz grid and thinking to myself, wow, if there's so many organizations that I need a biz grid to know which ones they are, that's a lot of organizations. And so I think that there's a lot of power in having so many different flavors of assistance that are available and so many different areas that people can go and be able to get more closer to one-on-one kind of expertise and help. So I wouldn't want to highlight one. I think that the most powerful thing is actually the network and the very connected nature of that network.
I can see that Jill has had her media training, because the first thing they tell you never want to be trapped into that, what's the one? Don't get trapped into what's the one. Very savvy. I like that. So, Ben, you have a question? So what have you learned from your experience in Ghana and in San Francisco that you can now take and apply in Detroit?
I think the one thing that's been consistent through Ghana, through San Francisco, and even, when I think back to my time in New Brunswick, it's being willing to take on a challenge, being willing to ask, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? And to really be imaginative and be willing to take on that risk that comes with trying something that hasn't been tried before, could fail, and going after it with a really strong sort of approach as well. Because what I found is when people make an effort towards something, a really strong effort, even if they don't reach the particular thing that they're trying to get to, they often will reach a number of other interesting things along the way, and they'll often also build up a lot of respect and advocacy from the people who see that journey. And so that is something that I think is going to be very powerful in Detroit, and especially given that we have so many opportunities in front of us here. And we have so many opportunities to build advocacy amongst people within Detroit, amongst people beyond Detroit. And I think that that's going to be a really powerful tool for us as we look for how do we get these ideas to come to life and to scale.
All right, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see here. This fellow back here has had his hand up for a while. Yes, sir.
I'm a huge fan of bringing forth great ideas and then giving people the support that they need to make those ideas happen. It's very much in line with the work that I've done as an advisor to startups and the work that I've done even beyond that. I'm super excited about these kinds of challenges, and I think that any opportunity that we give for people to explore new ideas and explore different ways that they can address challenges that are important to them and to their communities is something that we should encourage.
Mr. Lewis, you had a question. So the question is, if you have a product here and you have customers who might be interested in that product in Ghana, how do you get it over there at a cost where that product will be competitive with what might be available locally?
Mm-hmm. So I would reframe the question. I would think instead of thinking about, well, how do we get this done in this one particular lane? You know, how do we take a product from here and make it cost competitive in Ghana? Are there other routes that could be considered as well? I mean, I start thinking about some of my advising sessions and want to pull out a whiteboard right now, you know, start thinking about, is this a product that maybe could be made differently for Ghana, maybe with a different approach that would make it more cost competitive? Does it have to be made exactly the same way? Or is it something where there could be even alternative products that will solve the same pain point, but will take a different approach as well? And just think about all the different routes that are possible, and then you can weigh them and figure out which one is going to be the best one for your company.
All right, so one more question. I have to wrap it up. Dr. Reamer, Don Reamer from Lawrence Tech. Don spoke pretty loud, so I don't know if it but Don and I have had this discussion before. So what can we do here in Michigan to facilitate or foster or identify businesses that can help us economically, competitively recreate this kind of manufacturing base that will employ lots of people who are low skill or no skill or entry level people, but to get closer to where we were, where we had more employment? How can we foster that kind of manufacturing and engineering industry here going forward?
I think innovation is the start of it, really. It is the start of a lot of things, really thinking about, okay, so what made manufacturing really get started here in full force, and what drove the skill set, the customer base, the relationships, and then look at new ways that set of principles can be redeployed. And I think that helps with regards to traditional manufacturing. I think it helps when we start thinking about next generation manufacturing and start thinking about what's going on now with 3D printing and with, sorry? Yeah.
I mean, you could have something going on in Germany, make it reproduced here. That's all you have to do is set that SD file over and you've got it. It's still great.
Yeah.
It's not all the world.
And starting to think about agricultural manufacturing, and there's so many interesting new directions that I'm super excited about.
We can talk later.
Yeah.
I'd like to really.
So that's the one thing that gives so much promise to this whole area of revitalizing these urban areas, the fact that the pace of technological innovation is going so rapidly, we create so many new opportunities that weren't there, 5 years ago.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that's so exciting. It's a constantly evolving market. And I think being in a position where we have the people and the resources and all of these great ingredients to evolve with this market and drive the next direction of it is very exciting.
So Jill, I want to thank you for coming here and doing this. I know you've been very busy with your duties over there in Detroit. And as I say, I'm impressed that Mayor Dugan is bringing people to town like you. He brought another person to town I want to give a shout out to. I don't see him here today, but there's a fellow by the name of Charlton Driscoll who just came to the city, back to the city. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan College of Engineering. He was a Fred and Louise Tarver Scholar during his time here at the University of Michigan, and he's now working on community engagement initiatives in the city of Detroit. So again, I'm impressed that Mayor Dugan would bring him back from Washington, D.C. and have him working in that capacity for the city. And it looks like some bright, innovative things could be happening. Thank you again. We'll definitely be in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David.
Core beliefs. First of all, if you're going to do something like this, you have to have anchor institutions. One of the things that we pride ourselves on at Rutgers